When you, in your different, obviously, departments, start working with someone new, you work with a new director, Eliot, what's going through your mind? What is going through your mind as the DP when you're, you know, especially with TV, when it's many new directors, many of the times?
Yeah, you know, it's a thing where, you know, I mean, the industry is pretty well, their standards kind of, you know, and so, you know, you kind of expect certain things from different people coming in and whatnot, but always the relationship with a new director coming into a television show on any given episode is one where you're taking that first chunk of time during prep to not only, you know, deal with all the issues that immediately are landing in your lap about the whole thing, but also to try to sort of understand, you know, what their approach is going to be, what their particular aesthetic is like, and also to just sort of build trust so that, like, you know, once you get out there and you start doing things, you can have a cooperative relationship with that person and it doesn't become, you know, adversarial or something like that. And the trust thing is huge, and you got to kind of like ramp it up very quickly, you know, in the television space, because you only have a few days, and these people come, you know, these are people you've never met before, you know, unlike a feature or something where presumably you were hired by that director. These are people that have been hired by the producers, the showrunner, whatever, and it's a new one every couple of weeks, a new person, and you've got to build this whole relationship and start over again each time, you know.
And just to that question, how do you keep, because part of your duties as the DP is to keep the show on track in its visual style and stuff, but you're bringing in direct, you know, artistic directors who have, how do you not hem them in and keep the train going in the same tracks that you've set?
You know, it's been my experience that most directors coming onto a show are cognizant of the fact that they're doing that show, right? And so that for the most part, they're not coming in and going like, we're going to do this just completely, you know, it's all going to be handheld this entire episode. And you're like, we've never done a handheld shot in this show ever, right? You know, that sort of thing, at least for me, it hasn't happened yet, you know? And so, you know, there's times where, you know, a director might want to do something that's like a little outside of the visual language that you've been using on the show, and for the most part, I don't find it to be my job to say no to people. Like, I will talk to them, like if I think it's way out of bounds, like it might become a conversation, but like generally speaking, it's like, oh, you want to try this thing, let's give it a try, you know, and see what it goes. And you know, there's been a handful of times where directors tried things that didn't really work out, you know, or didn't land so well with like the producers or the showrunner or whatever. And then there's other times where people did things and people fell in love with them, you know, and it became part of the vocabulary of the show. So you kind of, from my perspective, is like, you try to understand what it is the director wants to do, and then make an effort to make sure it kind of fits in. And you know, hopefully it isn't something just so wildly out of place that you end up, you know, having to talk them out of it or whatever. But you know, that doesn't seem to happen that often.
And Dan, so when you're working, because obviously you go show to show, and there might be a lot of different cinematographers that you immediately have to become BFFs with, how do you approach that?
Well, this is such a collaborative art, you know, and particularly in the role of the director, but I think almost anybody who works on a film is working with a lot of human beings, a lot of different people. But the director, you know, is really probably interfacing with probably more than, you know, having to collaborate with perhaps with everybody. So, you know, everything is a relationship. Everything is kind of reading the person in front of you, finding your way to relate and connect to them, and to both benefit from what they have to offer you, but making, you know, creating the conditions for them to offer you their best work and for them to succeed. So, you know, as it is with when you're directing cast, you know, everybody is an individual. So you have to, as a director, you have to find your way, your particular relationship with that human being. And the same is true with a director of photography. Eliot and I have talked about this. It is interesting how, you know, you develop an immediate sense of whether we communicate well, or where there might be, you know, a different approach that we're going to have to kind of allow for in the other, and maybe benefit from learning something new. But, you know, the key is, you know, coming from your authentic self, but also understanding that it's a network of relationships you're really dealing with and trying to build. And so everything you know about life really, you know, comes to bear. Everything you know about, you know, how to get the best from people and how to get the best from yourself, you know, is a constant kind of assessment moment to moment.
Exactly, exactly. So
Yeah.
I'd love to jump into the script, actually. So Charlie, let's pull up the script. And I want to hear from you, Dan, starting. Let's go to the first page of the script. Into when with this, Charlie, just roll into exact, keep going. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to put I can start us off. Exterior South Central day, July 14th, 1984. From a police car rooftop, cruise through a summer Saturday in South Central, a group of young men on a corner, thin gold chains around their necks, standing beside a nice car. So do you guys, when you read the script at first, are you in it for the read? Are you starting to already think about your equipment you're going to need? Like what's going through your heads at this point as you start the read of the episode?
Well, I think it'll be interesting hearing from Eliot. I think we, you know, are coming at it from a different perspective. I'm coming at it from the position of kind of storyteller. So I'm trying always, when I first read a script, to pretty much be a blank slate and try to put aside, not come to too many conclusions too quickly. I like to let the material really wash over me so I can really discern what is of interest to me, where I think the story is, what I think the writer's intentions are, and also really figure out where I connect to it and where I don't and where I need more clarity. So when I'm reading like just this scene, you know, and where I think probably Eliot would approach it similarly, wanting to know the story, but his area is more in terms of strictly the visuals. But like any good cameraman, Eliot approaches it like, you know, from story. You have to know story first. To me, that's where everything starts. Everything has to serve story, and so that's kind of key. So I'm trying to read a script like this and try to see what is being communicated. And this first paragraph provides a couple of you know, specific things you're seeing and what I interpreted that to mean, and had confirmed when I talked to Dave Andrew, the writer and showrunner, is we're really starting to see a change, as I mentioned earlier, in the community. That like these young men wearing the gold chains. Well, why is that there? It's to show that, you know, people are making money selling drugs and driving a nice car. That's something that they might not have had in the previous season. And that there's a cop behind the wheel who is the father of the love interest of the kind of anti-hero lead of the show. So who's a drug dealer. So that's right away a conflict. So I'm trying to kind of let the whole thing steep. That would be the kind of, and wash over me. And I'll try to wait for my impressions to deepen before I start making too many decisions or conclusions about what sort of equipment or how exactly it should be shot.
On that note, Dan, so at this point you had, I imagine, watched the last two seasons and their storytelling languages.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, I had actually worked on the previous two seasons, so I was familiar with it. But if I were approaching this as my first entry into the show, I take it as my responsibility to watch as many episodes as I can, learn everything I can about the sensibility of the show, as Eliot was referencing, you know, learn what the visual language is. Like, do they shoot handheld? Do they not? Do they have classic kind of still frames? Or do they like a moving camera? What has become the established visual language of the show? Because that's something I have to serve. That's something I have to make mine. I have to, that way of seeing, I have to incorporate into the way I'm going to see, not so I can mimic it, but I think of it as a language I'm learning, not so I can mimic it, but so I can speak it in my voice. I may deviate from it, but I have to understand, I think it's important to understand that anything you choose to deviate, anytime you choose to deviate from something, will be experienced as a deviation. It's not like the audience is going to throw away any prior associations it's had to the show. So if you just suddenly change everything, they're not going to watch that as like, oh, I'm just watching a new show. They're going to see, why is this changed? You know, why is my expectation not being met here? So you have to factor that in.
And so how would you describe when you came in visually, in your mind, this show was a cinematic, like what's the textures you were going for?
Well, I think the fact that it was, you know, set in a disadvantaged community in a rough neighborhood, you know, it was a pretty gritty show. It had a pretty colorful palette. I think I liked that about how it was establishing this innocent time. Was pretty colorful in the first season too. And it's like it tried to show the richness of not the literal richness, not the monetary richness of the community, the richer life of the characters, you know, before the blight of this crack epidemic. So it was colorful, but it was, I thought it was kind of sensuous. And apart from that, I didn't think it was fairly straightforward. I mean, good compositions, good frames, but I didn't regard it as a highly stylized show. I regarded the visuals always telling a story.
Instead of jumping out at you and calling attention themselves. And Eliot, so what are you thinking about when you're looking at children playing on the yards and then cars moving?
You know,
where do you go with this?
I mean, it's much like Dan said, like initially I kind of just usually read and just, you know, for me, it's a lot of like, it just sort of plays in my mind. Like I'm just, you know, kind of watching it. Like when I read it, you know, especially the first time, you know, some things will jump out at me, like obvious, you know, things that are going to be necessary in order to do what it says, you know. But my approach, I guess, also is very, like, it's very story focused, I guess. Like I think of things in terms of like, when I read, especially a well-written script, you can kind of glean the visual intention of the writer and the visual intention of the scene usually, you know, just from the first reading. And that just sort of evolves in the process of the prep and stuff. And then it becomes more solidified as you go along. You know, I mean, you might, a block like that very first bit where it's very sort of, you know, here we are cruising down the streets and there's this going on and that going on and that going on, you know, which is very impressionistic and kind of montagey. Like you initially see it as like in your mind as, oh, it's these pictures, but as you kind of then the prep goes along, it becomes more apparent that it's going to be, oh, it's going to specifically become this, and the camera's going to be mounted and it's going to come over to here. But those things aren't really something that come up until you actually are getting into the physical reality of how are we going to do this, you know? So the initial thing is really usually about like Dan's saying, it's like you read it and you try to understand it as a story, because you don't want to be imposing things on it, in my mind. Like you want all the shots, everything you're doing, you want to sort of organically come out of the narrative in the strip. You don't want to like just from the get-go say, oh man, we're gonna, you know, get to Russian arm and we're just gonna fly down the street with this. It's like, well, that might be completely inappropriate. You know, you want to just sort of bring it from where the place of the story is and then start making decisions about how to achieve that technically, you know.
I'll add something else too that I realized really factored into my thinking on how to shoot this, and Eliot and I worked closely on doing it this way. I'll often also, and I write about this. I have a chapter in my book on this, by the way. I've written a book that there's a whole chapter on this particular scene, the shooting of it, and I'll put a plug in for it. It's called Directing Great Television. And what's very important, I think, often is to contextualize things. You know, you'll read a script and it's like, it says things happen. Like here, you're looking at this page and there's like 2/8 of a page quickly describing the physical, you know, things you're seeing on the street. And then it jumps right into this action. Well, I think it's important always to help an audience understand the context in which things are happening. And so, you know, like at this beginning moment, it's very, elliptical what it describes. It's not a great deal, a lot of detail. It's just saying you're okay from a rooftop POV. You're in this guy's point of view, and he's driving along, and suddenly there's this scene. Well, one of the things that after I had read it once and more than once and thought about it, and I'm sure we'll see the rest of the scene too, but I thought it important to contextualize the world we're entering here. And so we spent a lot more time shooting that first 2/8 of a page, I'd say, than you would think, from the page. We spent a lot of the day trying to establish what I'll call the context, these vignettes that Andre is watching as he drives through. But I also was thinking about a shot that I really loved in the pilot, the first episode, which was a drone shot high over these towering palm trees, looking down onto this more innocent time, the street of, actually it was started a drone that actually pulled it within the course of the scene, it kind of pulled away and you saw these beautiful palm trees and it was a more idyllic time. Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be nice to kind of recall that in this opening moment, in this opening montage of his driving. And, we picked this location because I really wanted I wanted to be in the same area where these palm trees were, and there really aren't that many blocks anymore in South Central where they exist. There are only a couple of blocks. So I don't, maybe not spend much more time on this, but Eliot and I spent a lot of time figuring out the opening shot to the season, to the scene, which I think was important to establish a context within which people could then start to understand the scene mm-hmm. with more meaning than simply if we just cut to suddenly this scene happening with this drug deal happening in the street.
So it's interesting, the fact that it is the very first thing you see in the very first of the whole season, like that's a kind of a consideration that comes up in television often, that it's the same kind of in other things, but it's like there are these considerations like, well, somebody's going to turn this on, is going to be the very first thing they're going to see in the very after having not seen this show for X number of months or whatever. And so there's times where things like that become like extra important, mm-hmm. To make something that really grabs,
100%.
So we spent a lot of the time, and we only had one day to shoot this. That's a whole other story. I think people, if they really want to hear the full story of that, they should read the chapter in the book on Snowfall, but I don't think we'll have time today to go into it. But we spent a great deal of the day just on that first couple of eighths page. And because of the very reason, Eliot and I are both pointing to, it's like we really wanted to locate the audience in our story where we wanted them to be, full of associations that we wanted to remind them of, so that the scene would have more meaning that we could watch happen.
Amazing. So, and literally this might be very granular, but what is so you guys meet each other for the first time, you're at whatever meeting you're at, and you're looking at the script together. What is the conversation you're having to get it to the point that you're both like, okay, we need to look at our day and spend, more than usual on these first montages and these, little bits, because that's going to add impact? Well,
your audience should understand that, and those who are experienced in series television know this already. It's a huge puzzle to put together. This is just one scene in a very, very busy script. So Eliot and I are kind of, multitasking on various fronts from the get-go. At first we look at each other like, how the heck can we do this? It's too much work, right? And, so we're figuring out, we were prepping simultaneously so many other huge scenes. So we didn't get too granular at the beginning. We're basically in a van trying to pick out locations, trying to get all the data we need before we can see what's even doable, in our 9 days to shoot. I think it's normally 8 days. They gave us an extra day. This would have taken about 12 days to shoot if we had shot everything. So, before we start telling the producers what we think should be cut, my bias always is try to see what it takes to really do it all, to do it well. And maybe there's ways to do it shorter. And we nip and tuck and we do things. And then we get to a point where we realize, there's just too much. We have to, for a long time, this scene to me felt like it was going to be 2 days. I don't know if we're going to keep going with the script, but what happens, I can just summarize for people, is this drug deal kind of falls apart. It's happening in the middle of the street. The cop stops, he approaches them. The drug dealer puts the car into gear, takes off. The woman leans into the car and her body flailing out out the side window as he's driving off, endangering her life. The cop, it was scripted originally, goes back to his car, chases in a car, several blocks. She falls off. He comes up to her. She looks to be dead. When he gets near her, she springs out, springs up surprisingly, runs off, breaks off a antenna from a car as the cop is chasing her, turns it into a crack pipe as she's running through the neighborhood, stuffs it with crack. He loses her, finally sees her. She's lit the crack pipe and she's now fine him taking her anywhere because she's high. Well, that's an enormous.
Charlie, go to the next page if you would. Yeah, that's incredibly.
I don't know if it's still in this.
Keep going from there. Next page, please. Okay.
Great. Okay, so here's like people still watching. Andy Sanger, not sure what to do. She. Okay, now.
So this is rewritten.
Yeah, this is rewritten from the original. You'll see all those 3, 4, 5 omitted.
Mm-hmm.
That was
not omitted.
Based, you'll see the scene hopefully soon where she, which was a very dangerous stunt. We had to figure out how to do it safely. So Eliot and I are first figuring out how do we want to photograph it. And then I'm dealing with the stunt coordinators. How can we do this safely?
Right.
And this is just one stunt in a huge show that involved, a huge shootout in the projects, a whole crack house expose. I mean, it was a huge, a crash landing in a Mexican airstrip. I mean, of a plane. It was like enormous. And this was just one scene. However, it was the opening scene, and it was one of the most important scenes, and it was setting the tone not just for the season, but it was also establishing important thematic points, namely that crack is making people so insane about this drug that the whole community is falling apart. So we had to deal with so many different things, and what we wound up coming to was, we thought, well, we need 2 days to shoot this, but we didn't have 2 days, so we had to make it 1 day. So how to keep the energy of it into 1 day? Well, the idea that we came up with was let's lose the addict getting up and running through the neighborhood, because that would take easily half a day, if not more, to shoot that whole thing. Why not we just make one-stop shopping here? She falls off. He thinks she's gone. She turns out not to be gone. And I came up with a plan of maybe how to establish that he might think she was knocked out before he arrives and sees she's actually using that time to get high. So all of these things are happening kind of simultaneously. I'm not sure how I've gotten off on this jag, but I'm trying to, for your audience, because I know we don't have a lot of time, condense, how much you have to kind of multitask and think. But it really, came from, Eliot and I and the assistant director and the stunt coordinator all kind of putting our heads together. How can we make this sequence preserve what's most important in the storytelling, preserve the excitement, but also not, dilute all of our resources so we can't, can't do everything else well too.
And so at that, just one, before we move on, at that point though, you guys have like your internal conversation. When does it go to the bigger guns, the showrunner, and say, I mean, is that the last stop where it's like,
I think it's generally the director, generally is trying to figure out how he or she is going to do it, work out with the people that can support him or her in that, and then find out, how much time do we need? And then I have the conversation. And I called Dave Andrew on the showrunner. I said, hey, this is great. If we do it, everything that's scripted, we're going to need an extra day to shoot. Can we get the extra day? No, of course, we're not going to get the extra day. And then saying, I have a suggestion. And, you can't just throw your hands up and turn it over to him and say, no, you solve it. But I like to come up with a suggestion. And so I said, look, let's do a couple of things. Let's not have the drug dealer, let's not have the cop get in his car to chase after the drug dealer. Let's not have it go several blocks. Let's have it just be one block. He runs after it. She jettisons from the car within the one block that we have. And then let's lose that whole running off and all that. Now, that didn't come out of the blue. I had asked Dave, what's important to you about this sequence? And he says, well, I want to show how crazed people are when they're addicted to crack. And I said, well, maybe we can get the same effect if she rolls to a stop behind a car and we think she's dead or unconscious. And, he was a little reluctant to let go of it, but showrunners have to see reality too. So he was happy with the solution. An interesting thing I'll just throw in here, again, I wish we had more than the limited time we have, but what, the whole thing hinged on her being hidden behind a car. And when we're shooting from a shot list that was really precise, and we were trying to, be as time efficient as we could, it was a dangerous stunt. And when the stunt woman, fell off the car the first take, it just didn't work. The second take, she did a great skidding across the pavement, but she wasn't anywhere near where we needed her to be behind a car. And, I said, let's just keep going and I'll figure it out. And if you read the book, the chapter, you'll find out I was actually very fortunate that there was a mistake in the cues that wound up enabling us to cut the thing in a good way. But, you got to be open to kind of keeping the story in mind so that things that happen on the day of shooting, you can utilize them. And if you have story in mind all the time, you have a much better chance of kind of making it happen. But to your question, yes, it's generally, I think, the director who will maybe go through the line producer and say, you got to ask for more time or for cuts. But I like to deal as often as I can with proposing solutions and dealing with the showrunner directly.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Go again. Yes, Eliot.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, like, these things don't happen like immediately either. Like, there's always a process of, like, you go out and you try to figure it out. Like, we scouted these alleys, we scouted where she would run, we scouted where Andre would go. Like, and so there's you end up building these plans knowing that, like, well, this is way too much work, but you go through the work to, like, understand what exactly it is, so that so everybody starts to understand, like, okay, if we're going to try to do this, this is this. If we can't do that, then we got to rethink. But, nobody just goes in and goes, oh, we can't do that, and then it's an immediate rewrite. It's like, you're spending a couple of days going down there, talking it through, walking around with everybody, and working just as if you were going to do that entire sequence to get to the point where it's like, okay, that's what it means to try to do this. And then you,
and sometimes, and Eliot, wouldn't you say too, Eliot, that sometimes, certainly my experience is, something that looks impossible, once you get into doing it, then inspiration you know what, if we did it this way, we could do it. And it's like, great, let's do it. Because I am loath always I hate, coming to the showrunner or the writer and saying, hey, we can't do what you wrote. Yeah, I know it would be great that way, but we just can't. It's like, that's like the most uncomfortable thing for me. I'm always trying to deliver as much as I can. I'm trying to bring added value. I'm trying to add things that maybe they're going to embellish. So you never want to be you always want to do what Eliot is saying, just, because that's the best way to be. You want to give you want to realize as much of a script as possible, and hopefully even add beats to it. But at a certain point, there's reality, and you have to face that too.
Well, and I think something that you said is really important is that, especially, well, as a director, even and in my position as a director of photography, if you feel that you're up against something that is undoable, not to just say that it's undoable, but to offer another route, and offer another option, because on some level, that's what you're there for. You're there for being able to realize what is on the page. And it's like, if you understand, like you're saying, if you understand narratively and story-wise what the point of this scene is, oftentimes running up against something that's physically undoable within the context of the resources you have, you can still say, like, well, because I understand that this scene needs to get this point across, we could do this other thing instead. And that's always the best route, as opposed to just throwing up, nobody gets anywhere just saying, well, we can't do this, you got to go rewrite it, Like,
and I want
to give an option.
And I want to share with the audience, Liz, because I know it's getting close to the time we're going to need you to show the episode and take some questions. That, by the way, this looks like it's only a 2-page scene, which is incredible to me, because it's so much happens. So this is an example of, like, page count means nothing. It's like, how long did it really take to shoot it? But what had originally brought us to this, we picked, actually, there's only about 2 blocks, maybe even 1 block. We really only filmed on about 1 block where the trees were right, and there was an intersection there too. And when you see it, just know that the way we made that work was by using a lot of different angles to make it look like different streets, as Andreas, so we did that. But we were so, I was really, my main worry on this whole day was the safety of the stunt and making it both exciting and hellacious and also not injure anybody. So we spent a lot of time on figuring that out, and it was great. Eliot came up with some fantastic camera mounts, and I won't go into all the details. I do hope people will read the account in the book because I think it's fun. But what we wound up racing for is the last shot, which was, we wound up chasing the sun. The only way we could make this work was to shoot into backlight all day. So we didn't have to artificially create that. So we were shooting out of sequence, always shooting, against the sun to create the best light. And as it turned out, the opening shot to the episode was the last thing we did. And it was kind of obviously one of the crucial element to it. So we're racing to finish this stunt. I think we get it pretty well, and you'll see all that. And then at the end of the day, while we're finishing that up, Eliot's got the camera being mounted with the shot we're going to do. I decided not to do a drone shot. I was thinking originally, well, let's do a drone shot to recall that great shot from the pilot. But because I wanted to be in Andre's point of view, and it's even in the script, it says the camera is on the top of the police car. And I thought, okay, well, how can I take advantage of these great towering trees and suggest the drone shot? And Eliot and I developed a shot, which I think was quite beautiful, which an ambition anyway. We wanted to be pointing straight up at these trees. So we didn't really know where we were, except that we were looking at these towering trees going by in the sky, and then tilt down from those as the car was moving, and then end over on the police car, and then see the neighborhood. And then we had other stuff that have to happen. We have to, cut to the cop inside and all that. But, everything was going great that day. And we had a second car that Eliot could have the camera mounted on it, ready to go. Sun is dropping. And we get ready to come do the opening shot of the episode. And it was a very hard shot to orchestrate because a lot of extras had to be cued exactly when to start. And we didn't have many cracks at it. And when the sun was just about to be no good, it was like maybe one more take. We started the shot, and it turned out really well. And we all just kind of had an incredible sigh of relief that we'd gotten this scene all in one day, which is going to go by in no time. You're going to watch it. It's going to be like a 2-minute scene. You go, what's the big deal? But it was a tremendous feat of scheduling and a lot of hard work.
Wonderful. It's a beautiful scene. We're going to play it now. And it really sets, I think, the tenor for, the rest of the season, as this, almost a sadness comes through and a sort of beautiful poeticness comes through, even though it's a gritty and dark and stuff like this, but it opens very, very poetically. So Charlie, let's play it. And then we may play it again and have the guys talk about it, but let's play it first, please.
Trashman didn't get my trash today. Oh, why? Because they want more pay. Buses on strike want a raise in fare, so they can help pollute the air. But that's what makes the world go round. The ups and downs of carousel, changing people's hands around. Go underground.
It's all there.
Come on, now you know how this works.
I'm just gonna be the rock.
Bitch, this only 9.
No, it's 10.
You saying I can't count?
Just count it again.
Hey, get out of
Give
here.
me the rock and I'll leave.
Hey,
Jesus Christ. $1
Hey, walk away.
It's really cinematic, really amazing. Let's just play it in the background, Charlie, without the sound if we could. Eliot, this is going to be a geeky question, but I love all the flares and stuff that really add such poignancy. Were they on purpose through the type of lenses you had, or is that a post thing, or tell us?
No, we were just embraced, you know, what was there, the sun coming in and the flare, especially in the driving stuff, you know, like when it pans around and you see Andre the first time and stuff, like, it was just like, we just let it happen, you know, didn't try to stop it. And yeah, there's times where, like, you know, like these kind of flares that are happening now, like, to me, they sort of feel organic, and like this, as we're coming around through the sun, you know, it feels appropriate, you know, it doesn't feel forced to me. Sometimes flares get a little bit distracting, but in this case, it just seemed to be working for us.
And for you, Dan, you have so many wonderful extras and bicycles and things like that. Did you try different things, or did you sort of just roll out the way you had envisioned?
No, I'm very appreciative of when my assistant directors really are good with background. And if they're not, which they were in this case, but when they're not, I'll jump in myself. I mean, it's like background, you know, background players are actors in your show, and anybody who, you know, they're all contributing to the world of the show. And so it was very important, all the particulars in this one. And there were particular importance, like that tilt down at the very beginning depended on a guy crossing the street at the right time. And not that once we got inside the point of view, I wanted to see that car drive by, which I'll say one thing about those flares, it was a little later than we had expected to be doing it. It did obscure who was driving that car and that it was a nice car. So the benefit of the flares was to the disadvantage of really establishing who those guys were in there. But that was, I needed that car to cross just to pan over and reveal Andre, the policeman. So all those things were kind of, you know, needed to be orchestrated very specifically. And then the guy who was like the drug buyer before the young woman comes up to buy. I mean, all that stuff had to sell and to be, you know, credible and believable. And you know, I'll do another take if the background isn't selling, because you're creating verisimilitude. You're creating an illusion that's really there, and that punctures that or makes it more difficult to imaginatively connect to the story is not good. So background does take a lot of orchestration, and that last shot, that was what was difficult about it, was
Charlie, just play it again.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
There was I think it's really beautiful. What really makes my heart sing is the guy on the bike.
Yeah, well, that was kind of important, because I needed something that we could cut to from this shot. So this shot, you'll see, okay, there's the guy on the bike. Now I'm going to cut inside the windshield, and I needed something that looks like we're in the same scene. So the next, there you go. So it's like, it feels like a punch-in, you know. That may have even been a second camera. I'm not sure if that was at that time, but which would have ensured the match. But there you see this crossing. I needed that cross to happen just so that we didn't want to wait too long to reveal the hero whose point of view this whole scene is, the cop. You know, we wanted to, that's also something that's very important. I think directors have to think about is, you know, what story are we telling? Whose point of view is this from? And it was very important to locate this man as the focal point, as it's his point of view. This whole scene meant to be conveying to him, because he's going to become the chief adversary of, you know, of the drug dealer anti-hero. And this is meant to show, you know, how he developed, you know, among other things, what helped him develop his passion to save his community.
100%.
Here you have her reaching in. This is great. And then, and I love this close-up that you'll see of the woman. Now, we were fortunate here that another thing that enabled us to do this was we got a stunt woman and stunt man to play the drug dealer, the drug addict and the drug dealer. So, because an actress wouldn't have been able to, you know, be in close-up and take that fall, you know, and I wanted to have see the woman fall away from her close-up. So that was also something we didn't know we were going to find. That took auditions during prep. Are we going to find someone who can do it? And we were fortunate to find it. So there's so many different things that go into solving this and making it shootable.
And this last part where he's huffing it here, did you do it, have him run into that shot realistically multiple times, or
Oh,
how
yeah.
did-
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We did.
Okay, great. Let's go back to full screen. We have a few questiones, and it's an amazing book. Maybe Charlie, could you write it, Directing Great Television, in the chat? And you guys can get this incredible book that Dan wrote, and your memory is amazing. The
Not for
details
all
that you
things, but
remember.
generally when I'm working, I can remember that. There's a lot of things I can't remember that happened yesterday, but about this.
Exactly.
Good.
So Kevin asked, is this how a normal day looks like? Doesn't it look too busy?
This was a tough day, but there are not too many easy days. I'll say that. But this was a really challenging day. Elliot, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually in an episode of TV, this kind of show, at least, like you'll kind of pinpoint the like, okay, day 3 and day 6 and day 8 are going to be like these monsters that we got to deal with, and then everybody's going to get a break on the other days or whatever. You know, I mean, no day is ever really light in these things, but there's just some days that you're aware, like, okay, this is the mountain we got to climb that day. We're going to do it. You know.
So question for you guys, because is it, if you're finding that you're, say, Dan, on maybe a lesser intense show, and you're able to do it in 10 hours instead of 12 or quicker, is that something that you want to do, or do you want to, if you're running faster, do you want to flesh out more ideas or more things?
Oh, I'll always want to make it as good a scene as I possibly can. But there are days where you finish in 10 hours. And, you know, I'm not interested in just kind of waiting for inspiration to strike.
Mhm.
But, you know, when I'm mixing with the scene, dealing with the scene, I kind of know when I feel I have it and when I feel there's more to be mined. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling to ever have to leave a scene before I think I've gotten from it everything I want to get. And I work, and because I hate that feeling so much, that's another reason I prep so hard, because I want to be armed with as much foreknowledge of what everything is there to get as I can, because I'm going to learn more during the scene. I'm going to see something from an actor. I'm going to see something there. I'm going to see something in the, or Eliot or my cameraman might come up and say, you know, it'd be great if we get a shot. Like, yes, we got to have that. You know, there's going to be those kind of things that are going to, you know, be exciting, and because I know they're going to add to the felt experience of the, you know, all we're doing is we're trying to create an experience that's rich and meaningful for people. And, you know, to fail in that, to not give everything is the worst feeling. But that's why prep is so important. And people who don't take it seriously are really shortchanging themselves and the audience, because, you know, you need to really immerse yourself in the story and in the script so that you're just on the day you're there. But you know, when you got it, you know, it's time to say you got it.
And so when you're talking about prep specifically for the audience, you're talking for yourself, is that shot listing? Where are we going? What do you demarcate?
It's not just shot listing. It's really understand, for me, it's really understanding what's really going on in deeper layers of the scene. What's going on subtextually? What's going on? What would make this scene come to life? What would make me care about it? You know, and then it can't be prefabbed and premeditated. You want the feeling of life happening. So you've got to convey that to the cast, and, you know, so that they're going to embody real things happening within them. So a lot of my prep is thinking about how to work with the actors. What imaginative circumstances I occur to me that I want to help them, you know, play with, because, you know, they're carrying the ball in so many important ways. And if they're just acting something, it's going to feel that way. And so, you know, you want to create as many, some people call them happy accidents, as possible. You know, I love being surprised, but I also want to be, you know, provide the vision. I mean, this is the way I love working with Eliot. I love working with, you know, my collaborators in this way, and that I hope to provide a vision, this is what the story I think we're telling. This is this subjective state I think I want. How would you embellish that? How could you make that vibrate, be more vibrant? So that's the kind of thing you do in prep. so that you're not surprising, I don't want to surprise Elliot on the day. Say, hey, I'd really love this feeling to be lush and passionate. What do you think? Well, I wish you'd told me this before before I had all my lighting package and everything else. You don't want people to be surprised that way. You want them to use their creative juices so that, so you get the best from them.
And Eliot, for you, I'm sure it's always faster and faster. How fast can we go and get up and stuff? And how do you, I guess, protect the scenes that do need a little more time, that do need a little bit more?
Yeah, it's like,
Prep
it just comes down to planning, really. It comes down to like understanding, what actually physically we're going to be trying to do in whatever space with whatever people and equipment, and then creating a plan that everyone can get on board with and execute in a way that you can do within that amount of time, and prep, like, for me, it diverges a little bit than for what like Dan is doing, because at some point it does become sort of very physically technical. It becomes very much like, we're going to need to put this piece of equipment over here, and we're going to need to, do this first, and we're going to need to move that, and then we're going to need to put this in, and we're going to need to bring that camera over here, and we're going to hit, and I get into sort of a lot of those logistics just once you've gotten to the point where you really understand what it is you want to be doing, and then you kind of put together the puzzle pieces, the physical puzzle pieces, in order to give yourself the amount of time that you need to do it well when you're out there and get what you want, and hopefully to have a little bit of extra space, like Dan's saying, and like be able to, bring something more or something else, or add an extra thing to it, when you're out there.
Let me throw too, Elliot. I love when I can help. I want the DP to work as efficiently as possible, because it's going to give me more time with the scene. So I regard it as a real important job of mine to acquaint the DP as early as I can with what my intentions are, what I want. How can we do this efficiently? I'll shoot out of order. Let me and this sequence. I said we shot against the backlight. Well, we ended with the opening shot because that's when the sun was going to be in backlit position. And it's like, you don't want to just figure that out on the day. I want Eliot to tell me, okay, here's your shot list. And so it'd be great if we do this, then, this, then, this, then, because then I can do this, that, and the other. I said, great. Some things directors should be thinking about to help cameramen, which is, it's always good to have a backlight. Almost always. It's always good. You never want to shoot with front light. So, unless it's for some strange reason you might, but it's like, it's good for you to be developed as a director, to be thinking that I don't want to put Eliot in that position. I don't want to choose my location where I'm making it impossible for them, that it's going to take an hour longer to light because I've chosen to do it this way. I want to collaborate. I love it when Eliot can tell me I've worked out this efficient way to do it. Great, because that means I'm going to have more time on the scene with the actors.
Yeah.
And Eliot, do you like offering up lens choices or offering up shot? I'd like, okay, we're in the scene, we're about to move. How about if we did just get a cutaway of this?
Yeah, I take my role as to be there to be as much value added as I possibly can, and also I'm not there to determine whether or not exactly the thing is that we should be doing. It's like, I'm going to offer my ideas. I'm going to say, hey, what about this? Or we could do it this way, or we could do it this. But I'm also going to back off if it's like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, I find that it works best for me to try to really understand what it is that both the script and the director want, and then to be able to add, if I can bring something extra to the table about it, if I can, say, if we did this shot as well, you would have this other moment in this, emotionally in here, or this view of this person, or whatever, but at the same time, it's like, I don't get married to those ideas either, because there's, a director either responds to it or they don't. And I've found over the years, if like you try to push something on a director that they just don't get, or they don't respond to, you're wasting everybody's time, no matter how
100%,
good it
but-
might be, you know, if the director doesn't get it, like they're gonna be like, why did I bother doing that? You know?
Right. But
Yeah.
it's also a great ally for Dan to have in the field to be like, oh, so, you know, someone's also, because everybody's so in their department thinking about their department, and not everyone's
I would,
get
and
the
I would,
whole picture, let's
I would
say.
just say, for directors, it's really important to create that atmosphere where people are invited. You're not conveying, no, I'm doing it just my way. Don't tell me anything. You know,
Yeah.
it's very important to create, yes, come to me, because there are many, many cases, and I'm sure there were on this show, it was 3-4 years ago. So where, you know, Eliot would come with an idea, said, fantastic, that's great. In fact, he might not even be aware that his suggestion meant I didn't have to do something else I was considering doing. You know, it's like, but if you have to be confident enough to say no, say thank you, but no, it's not what I want. But, you know, to suddenly put up a barrier, I'm doing it my way, is really to limit yourself. So you really want to benefit from the expertise that others have. Like Eliot has tremendously more valuable visual expertise than I have. So why would I cut myself off from any suggestion?
100%. So guys, we are about at the end of our amazing talk today. It's really just amazing to have you guys. They have such knowledge and such humanity, and it's really wonderful to hear you guys chat. And I do think showing such a strong director DP relationship is really a wonderful thing for other filmmakers to see, and to see that that's like a real collaboration that happens. And I don't know, anything you guys, did we miss out on anything that you wanted to mention about anything?
Well, I would say that you saw a kind of wonderful, I mean, what Eliot was like ideal to me. I mean, it's like, he's going to be there. He's going to offer his suggestions. If they don't take it, fine. You know, that's a wonderful way to be. A lot of directors, you know, will find themselves with DPs who may not be so understanding of your role as primary storyteller. And that can be challenging, but, you know, and in those cases, I think it's important to remember, directors need to remember, not to abdicate your own sense of story at the same time that you want to stay open to the ideas. So, you know, hopefully you'll have, you know, DPs as thoughtful and intelligent and as understanding as Eliot is, but it's not always the case. And for DPs, you know, hopefully you'll have directors who are open to ideas, because it's frustrating when that doesn't happen. But, you know, the director has to take responsibility for being a storyteller. And sometimes that'll mean disappointing your collaborators if they feel they know better than you how the story should be told, but never abdicate, because that's the only reason you're there.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, that's the kind of the thing that also, even as a director of photography, ultimately, if you can demonstrate that you can do the craft, that's great. But really, the reason you're going to be there is because you have an aesthetic and an understanding of like what's appropriate and what is good for that particular show, that particular thing. And like, that's really what's most valuable. There's a lot of people out there who can, you know, just marshal the lights and whatever, but like to be somebody who can be like thoughtfully engaged with like what the appropriate sequences and pictures and shots are for whatever that you're doing is like, ultimately that's what people are looking for, you know.
100%. Well, thank you guys. This was so exciting. It's our first case study and it went really well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And okay, just super quickly, you guys aren't really social media humans.
No.
But you can find Dan's book, and it's Charlie put it in the chat. And then your next film that's out, Eliot, is what?
Oh, I have a film coming out. It's the prequel to a movie that came out earlier this year, which was X, and this one's called Pearl. And it'll be in theaters, I think, mid-September sometime. It's premiering at the Venice Film Festival, I want to say, this coming weekend. And then, yeah, and so that's exciting. It'll be out very soon.
Super exciting. Okay, guys, thank you so much. And thank
you,
you,
Liz.
New York Film Academy, for presenting the case study series.
Right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.